Hey, it's a lovely sunny day here in California, so please excuse the sunglasses. I put a little poem, kind of devotional poem, to my wife here on this page a week or so ago, and got much greater response from my friends to that than usual. And I wanted to reflect with you on what's behind that. You know, 17 years ago, I made a decision. It happened one night. It's not so much a decision, but perhaps a decisionless decision. A decision got made. I was sitting on the deck of my house. I was 43, just about to be 44. And I was looking up into the sky. I lived at that time on the top of a small mountain, it was called Banner Mountain. It's more like a big hill. So it was completely cloudless sky, no traffic, no street lights. You could really see the sky when I was looking up, and I was very alone. You know, my children were with their mother, who I was divorced from. I'd just split up with a girlfriend. I felt completely alone in life. Alone, not just alone that night, but alone in my life. And I reflected, you know, I'd been really interested in spiritual things by that time for, I don't know, 30 years or something. And I reflected, wow, if I die tomorrow and realize that I didn't reach the pinnacles of enlightenment or whatever, that would be so okay. I would so forgive myself for that. But if I died one day and realized that I had never truly loved, that would be, without doubt, a failed life. So a little decision got made in that moment that what was really important in these remaining years was to learn to love. And I realized I wasn't very good at it. I didn't know. Some people know how to love. I wasn't very good at loving in an intimate way. I can love humanity, but it was difficult to love. It's more risk intimately. I can love my children, but it's more in this intimate context. So 3 weeks later, I was in Sweden. And I met a young woman who had shaved her head and just come back from India. And she told me that she had been sitting at the banks of the Ganges. I didn't say anything, and she just said she'd had this thought, oh, all this spiritual stuff is all very well, but how much can I live this in my personal relationships? So I went, well, that's a coincidence, because her realization had also come 3 weeks before. We must have had those realizations pretty much at the same time. Nothing happened out of that, except that later we started sending email, you know, how's it going for you? How's it going for you? And we exchanged this mutual commitment we had to learning how to love. And this mutual humility that we weren't very good at it. And after a few months, through this email exchange, we came to the conclusion together that this was something that needed practice, rather like tennis, you know, or playing the piano. It's not something that just happens. If you're not good at loving, you're going to have to practice to get better. So we actually came up with this idea to practice together. Why don't we practice together? Since we're both interested in this, we don't have any other candidates. Why don't we temporarily practice together? Okay. We've been practicing together now for 17 years. And that's actually what we do. We practice together. And in practicing, everybody is faced with this strange conundrum when you love somebody deeply, or when you choose to practice loving deeply. There are different dimensions to a human being. Deepest that we hardly ever reach, maybe just on psychedelics or MDMA, or you know, in moments of rapture. There are moments when you see right through the human being into divinity, into God, and your partner becomes like a portal into something glorious and mysterious, quite beyond anything human. And then there are sort of layers on top of that. There's an archetypal layer, which is where you're seeing qualities that are universal, and then it ratchets all the way up to very individuated, just a bundle of prejudiced opinions, desires, and fears, and now you're just facing a personality, a rigid personality. So it's kind of confusing, because it's difficult to muster much real love or devotion for those habits because they're all conditioned. They're all irrational fears, self-important opinions, greedy desires. It's like, what is there to love in that? It's just kind of automated. So somehow it's necessary to drop down through the ratchets more and more deeply. And as you do so, the inspiration, the capacity to love becomes greater. And that's really what Chameli and I have done in 17 years, is we have used each other as a portal into something quite beyond the human. You know, human beings have always had a tendency to worship. I'd love to look at you without sunglasses, but I think I'm going to squint. Human beings have always had a tendency to worship. If you look it's strange, in every culture, as far back as we have history, human beings have bowed down to something beyond the human. It's a natural tendency. In India, it's Krishna, or it's Lalita Devi, or it's Rama. In China, people bow down to Huan Yin, and even though it's not really encouraged, in Buddhism, people still do bow down to the statue of the Buddha, even though it's not really that kind of a thing going on. People bow down to Jesus. People bow down and God, Jehovah. People bow down to the Prophet Muhammad and Allah. In every tradition, every culture, it's been there, and it's not really been borrowed. It's an instinct that human beings have to bow down to something bigger than themselves. But what do you see? When someone's bowing down, what you actually see is a piece of stone that has been carved into an effigy. Or you see a piece of bronze that has been cast to represent Krishna. Or you see a piece of wood that has been carved to represent Jesus on the cross, and you bow down to that. But if you think about it, when someone is in an act of worship, they're not worshipping stone or metal or wood. They're worshipping what that represents. And that's exactly the approach that Chameli and I take to relationship. I do feel devotional. I do. That's my religion. I worship. I want something to represent the divine, so I choose my wife. It's the most convenient, nearest thing. You wake up in the morning, right there, you see. But I'm not worshipping the girl from Bergen in Norway. I'm not worshipping the personality traits of that girl from Norway. I'm deliberately looking through that window to see a universal, beautiful, loving, forgiving, eternal femininity looking back at me. I'm worshipping the feminine face of God and politely ignoring the personal traits, just as you might politely ignore the farting of an elderly relative at family dinner. When your aged uncle farts, you don't go, "Oh, who made that one?" That would be kind of disrespectful to an old person. You just ignore it and carry on with the dinner, you see. So the personal is there, but we politely ignore it or make humor of it if it's our own, so that we can focus on what's beyond. So for 17 years now, whenever we're together, we perform a religious ritual together, Chameli and I, every morning. We sit opposite each other, and one of us will just sit like a statue. The other one bows down. And in bowing down, we say, "I love you. I'm so grateful for this love you shower on me. Please call forth from me the very best. Call forth from me what you saw in me when you entered into this contract. Call me forth. Thank you so much for your forgiveness, for your patience. I'm so sorry for being abrupt yesterday or angry or whatever. Sorry about that little noise. It's something in the garden. I'm so sorry for being less than you would demand. Please call forth the best of me. I'm so grateful." So this little prayer, it has a mixture of gratitude and aspiration to be the best you can be, apology for being less, and so you can kind of be absolved of that, And then we switch over. And that's the beautiful thing that makes it different from a statue. If you bow down to a stone image of the Buddha and you say your prayer, the stone image is not going to bow down to you. If you bow down to a bronze image of Krishna, the statue is not going to bow down to you. But when I bow down to Chameli and offer her the very best I can and dedicate my life to being a true devotee to what comes through her, and then she does the same with me, we've made relationship into something sacred. We've made the relationship into something that serves the same function that religion does. You know, that's really working well for me. And I'd love for you to consider the possibility of seeing into your partner more like a window than a painting, a window through which you can see something beautiful and eternal beyond the human.